now going to welcome Phil from World Beyond War to share his skillshare with us. So I think.
Thank you, Aislinn, and congratulations, Martin. Thank you for sharing all those wonderful resources. I've just put something in the chat. It would be really cool if you could share some of the links because I think they're really, really cool. So thank you so much. So I'm Phil, I'm from World Beyond War. I don't know if many of you know about World Beyond War, but we're a global grassroots organization with membership in 192 and counting countries. We try and differentiate ourselves from other organizations in two different ways. One, global in scope in the sense that we work with partners all around the world. Two, we're against the war system. So not just, war in Afghanistan, war in Syria, etc., against the war system. We've nominated several times for the Nobel Peace Prize, and we won the Global Educators Challenge Award. There's only 10 organizations around the world based on educating youth, communities around global challenges such as war, the war system, and climate change. I'm not in the UK, I'm now in Bolivia, and I just wanted to give you a sense of what it's like in Bolivia. I'm in a place called La Paz, which is known as rooftops of the world, and I just want to show you so we can all kind of be here together. So La Paz is 3,600 meters high, and I'm on the 19th floor. So just give you a sense there. It was been a bit of an early one for me. It was 5:30 when I woke up, but thank you so much for the invitation and lovely to be here with you. So what I want to do, I'm going to share the screen here, but before doing that, just to make sure that they're all here and we're all listening and we're not sleeping, can we just take a moment to use the reaction to give a sense of how we're feeling? So you might put thumbs up, or you might put love, or you might put, I don't know, ice cream. Is that an ice cream? Yeah, it is. Just to give a sense that we're all here and give a sense of how we're all feeling. There we go. Thank you. So I'm going to share the screen. Can you give me a thumbs up? And I think I can see you, if you can see the screen. Yes, okay, perfect. So thank you, Ben, thank you, Aislinn, thank you, Izzy, thank you, Alice, for the invitation. It's lovely to be here. This is where we want to go to, hopefully, in the 30 minutes that we have together. We want to share a model with you, which has been proving quite innovative in terms of addressing some of the challenges that the peace education field is facing. But the overall idea is to hopefully spark or influence thinking and actions of others, hopefully including people on the call. So that's hopefully where we're going to. In order to do that, we will split it up into two different parts. One is that we'll start thinking about what do we see as some of the broader challenges facing the peace education field. So you can think broadly about the peace education field, whether it be scholarship, practice, or perhaps more apt, think about your own practice. What are some of the challenges that you face? And then into those challenges, we will present a model, which is called Peace Education and Action for Impact. Now, disclaimer, this is a global effort, and we don't have a team. We will next year though, from Wales or the UK or England. We're working on that, and we're doing the first pilot this year. There's 12 country project partners that we're working with. So that's where we're going to. Let's start with the current challenges, and it's good in terms of to start an inductive way, and let's do a Mentimeter to get us all thinking together, in terms of what are some of the most pressing challenges that we see in our work as peace educators. So I'm going to put in the chat. I think I might have to come off the shared screen here. I'm going to put in the chat here, the Mentimeter, and if we could just take a couple of moments to think about one or more of the most pressing challenges facing the peace education community, or facing you and your work as a peace educator, just to get us thinking about it. We'll go on to sharing the screen here. Hopefully. Here we go. Okay, great, thank you. So can you all see, if you can see, put your thumbs up, the Mentimeter? Yes, okay, thank you. I can see everybody deep in concentration there, filling out. Okay, so what we've got COVID. Okay, We've got negative media. We've got seen as woolly skills versus knowledge. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Teachers' capacity, very important. And again, the teacher pack is wonderful in terms of that. The current political climate, teacher exhaustion. Yeah, great. Finding volunteers to work with us, mainstreaming in school. Yeah, the resources behind militarism, acceptance of war. Definitely with you on that one. That's the focus of our work. Thank you for that. Resistance due to perceived purpose of education. That's an interesting one. You know, the broader question of what is the purpose of education? Is it to produce people ready for the labor market, or is it to produce subjects that are you know, well equipped to bring about change in their communities? Teacher workload. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, we won't dwell too much on this. Thank you so much. That's got us thinking about some of the broad challenges that the peace education community is facing. With that in mind, and into those challenges, I want to share with you now, and hopefully you can see my screen. This has been one of the things that I've been thinking about, both with my scholarly hat on, the PhD, but also, first and foremost, I'm a practitioner with my youth work hat on, some of the challenges that we need to kind of address as peace educators, but more broadly with regards to working with young people. And I think some of the challenges relate to the work that we do inside the classroom. So one of the challenges facing peace educators around the world right now is, how do we transition? Some of us have been doing it before COVID, though, actually, and I know Izzy and Ellis have a wonderful peace education course. But how do we transition to a hybrid model or an online model and teach for peace, teach about and teach for peace in these contexts? That would be one of the challenges that springs to mind. Another challenge, I think, is an ongoing challenge within peace education. And if people haven't read, we contributed to the research and the report done on formal peace education in formal schools by the British Council and International Alert, when we wrote about this as well. Is this gap between the intellectual, the knowledge, which is necessary but not sufficient, you know, the rational thinking that's needed in terms of peace education, but also, as Carl Rogers would talk about, significant learning is about the experiential, also the emotional intelligence as well. So I think we can get better at that in peace education. That is one of the challenges. But then there's also the idea of, and it's a certain way of looking at things. I come at the work in terms of education is necessary but not sufficient. You know, if out of the school of Paulo Freire would talk about, you know, praxis. And I think we need to get better at providing young people with opportunities to learn about peace, but also to apply their learning beyond the classroom. So this idea of praxis. And then if you think more broadly, some of the challenges that the field are grappling with relate to, of course, the decolonization movement that's sweeping the whole world right now, you know, in terms of decolonizing aid, decolonizing peace. How can we move away from imposing our ideas of what peace should look like? How do we connect with some of the global policies, such as the SDGs, and Our Shared World is a wonderful example of that. There's other global policies, such as, you know, the YPS agenda, Youth, Peace and Security agenda, which has brought out 3 groundbreaking resolutions on youth, peace and security in the last 5 years, which basically says, you know, governments need to step up their game with regards to including young people more in peace and security decision-making and action processes. Of course, we have the existential crises, not COVID. COVID's a crisis, but it's not the existential one. We have climate change and we have nuclear weapons, and both of those have their roots and go back to the war system. The link with climate change is less known than the link with nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons and war, and the war system is very clear what the linkages are, but not all know about the linkages between the climate change and the war system. The biggest polluter on the planet is the US military. The biggest consumer of fossil fuels on the planet is the US military. You know, so if we want to address climate change, and it's right that individuals have a role to play, they do. And at the same time, we need to look at the bigger structures, you know, and there's no bigger structure than the the military, the militarization. So, and I don't need to say anymore with people on the call, who very much know a lot about that. Another thing I think is interesting, research shows that conflicts around the world are getting even more intergenerational. Conflicts around the world are getting even more cross-cultural. I think in Spanish there is also. So one of the challenges I think the field faces is how can we learn from each other? How can we engage in intergenerational dialogues? How can we engage in cross-cultural dialogues where global north learns from global south and vice versa? What's been happening in the peace education field is that this wrong idea of we from the global north are there to teach others, about peace building, where I can tell you I work day in, day out with people from Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan. I learn so much and it keeps me humble, learning from the great work that they're doing on the ground. So these are some of the challenges I think that we've been trying to grapple with. And this supports this idea of a community of inquiry, about learning from each other through collaboration. So hopefully that kind of sets a bit of a scene in terms of some of the challenges. Thank you for sharing some of the challenges that you're facing in your work. And I just wanted to share a few other challenges that come up in my head when I'm thinking about the work that we do in peace education. I want to use the last kind of moment now to share a model which has been working very well in terms of trying to address some of these, not all, some of these challenges. And this is the starting point for the work that we do at World Beyond War and with the various hats that I wear, equipping young people with the skills, tools, support to prevent war and promote peace. So we need to be both anti-war and pro-peace. Some people say, we have to speak so much about anti-war. Our argument is we need to be aware of abolishing war if we want to improve the likelihood of achieving negative and positive peace for the long run. So we see this as one of the largest and the most global and important challenges facing humanity. We now know that we have more young people on the planet than ever before. We now know that we're a 30-year high in terms of violence around the world. And we now know that the last 10 years, we're further away from positive peace, if you follow the Institute for Economics and Peace, than we've been in the last 10 years. So these are some of the things that drive the work that we do. We developed this program, and it's a collaboration between World Beyond War and Rotary, Rotary Action Group for Peace. Rotary is the largest service organization in the world. They have 1.2 million members, 36,000 clubs. We've set up an MOU with the Rotary Action Group for Peace to work on this project that we're calling Peace Education and Action for Impact. And I know, Izzy, I spoke to you briefly about this, but hopefully we'll give a bit of a perspective. Our starting point for the project, again, another great place to always start is begin with the end in mind, this is our ambition, to connect and support new generations of peace builders and war abolishers. There's brilliant work being done around the world in terms of young peace builders. I think there's less in terms of, connecting to your interest, Martin, around activism. I think that's brilliant. How can we tell more stories of young activists that are working to prevent war or address the war system? To help support them to become both subjects of change and agents of change. What do we mean by that? Subjects of change is the ability to turn the mirror inwards and to look at themselves and to transform themselves. Agents of change is the ability to do work out there. So it's kind of the inner than the outer dimensions of peace building or peace work. For those that are a little bit academically inclined, I've been developing this model for years and years and years. Here's what we want to try and do: put people at the center of peace building work. There's nothing new about that. We've been saying that for a long time. And at the same time, if we look at the research, we're far from doing that. But put people at the center, but do so in a way that engages them in reflection and action. So research, education is the reflection part, and the action and the advocacy they're separated here, but of course, in the real world, they should not be separated. But do so in a way that engages the local communities. That's an abstract theoretical model. What does it look like in practice? Well, our first project that we've put together for this year that's currently running is a 14-week Peace Education Action for Impact project. It's broken up into two parts. One is peace education, which is 6-week online. I'm going to say something about that shortly. 6-week online peace education journey. I'm going to say something about that shortly, and I'm going to be focusing on the peace education part because it's a lot to get in this 30 minutes. Part 2 is, okay, how do we take our learning and how do we put it into practice in the community? So we've developed this program and we have 12 country partners involved. And I'm going to say who those 12 country partners are shortly, but it's not just a case of, okay, engaging in education, see you later. They actually sign up for a 14-week developmental process. And each country project team is made up of coordinators. So this is the strategic leadership who are senior level youth workers, educators, Rotarians, etc. Then there's two coordinators. Then they recruit the rest of their team, which is made up of young people, 18 to 30, and 2 mentors, which are adults that work with young people through the process. So it's a real intergenerational collaborative learning experience, but it's also a cross-cultural because we've got countries from 4 different continents. I'll say something about that shortly. This is what it looks like as well in terms of the process that they're going through. They're now in part 2 of the program. So they've gone through the 6 weeks of peace education, which has been really cool to see. Venezuela interacting with South Sudan, interacting with Turkey. I'll say, hopefully, here's the countries that we've got involved. It's a first of its kind project from what I know of in terms of, the peace education field, which brings all these countries together. So we've got Cameroon, Kenya, Nigeria, South Sudan, Serbia, Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, US, Canada, Colombia, and Venezuela. If you look on the left-hand side, this is what happens in terms of the practicalities. The peace education part is that we use an online learning platform, Canvas, and I think I'll show you shortly because I think it's best to show you what it looks like. But we split it up into 6 different weeks with different modules, and people spend between 3 to 6 hours in their own time engaging. In addition to that, we have additional Zoom calls, which gives, like we are doing now, an opportunity for people from South Sudan to meet people from Kenya, to meet people from Nigeria, etc., and kind of learn together. And then part 2 is the peace action, which they actually just started a couple of weeks back. And actually yesterday we had their first, what we're calling peace project reflection groups, which gives the teams an opportunity to present up to 5 minutes their ideas for their projects. It was so cool, and fair play, they've got some good projects coming from South Sudan and Venezuela, really, really innovative projects. With our education hat on, this is how we think about education. We think that education should work the head, the heart, the hands. We think that it should look at the knowing, the being, and the doing. So the knowing part is the theories, concepts, ideas. This is the easier part. The doing part is probably just as easy as well, which is kind of the practice part. So we're looking at the intellectual intelligence, practical intelligence. The ongoing, and probably I would say the most difficult and probably the most overlooked, those great exceptions, is the being part. There's ways of being with self and others. So we broke up part 1 into 3 different parts. Part 1 was the knowing, and we're calling it understanding peace building. Part 2 is the being, and we're calling it becoming a peace builder. And part 3 is the doing part. And this is where we train, support people to understand, how do we design and implement a project? So I'm going to say a little bit about the specifics, and I'm going to show you shortly on Canvas. Oh, it's just changed. Here's what some of the things that we covered. So this has been crazy creating the content for the last 2 months, but the first week, and we invited Tony Jenkins, a great colleague of Penn, etc., to be the facilitator for week 1. I created the content. It looked at what is the nature of peace building, what are some of the key concepts. Others and I have made an argument for a long time. If you want to work for peace building in the world, you need to understand 4 key concepts: peace, violence, conflict, and power. What are some of the key considerations? And most importantly, what is the role of young people? Then the second week drew from, this is our award-winning book. If you haven't read it, I would really recommend reading it. It's called, it's on the right-hand side there. A Global Security System, an Alternative to War, which lays out a blueprint for ending war and establishing a just, sustainable peace. In this week, people get introduced to what is a system? What do we mean by systems thinking? Then what is the war system, and how do we replace the war system with a peace system? here's the blueprint that we've laid out, supported so much by peace science, etc., which revolves around 3 broad strategies. 1, demilitarizing security, and you've got lots of different components within that part. This is more really the kind of the negative piece, let's say. The other component is managing conflict without violence. We've got many components within this, including reforming the UN, moving towards a provocative security policy, so away from state security to human security. If people haven't checked this out, I'd really recommend checking it out. You can get a 15-page summary, which is free online. Demilitarizing security and managing conflict is kind of the hardware of the system. And then the final part is the creating a culture of peace, which is what we call the software of the system. You've got things like peace education, peace research, peace journalism, etc. So we introduce students to that. That's the head part. That's the kind of the knowing part. Then we move on to the being part, and we split this up into ways of being with self, which is really turning the mirror inwards. And we looked at issues to do with how do you develop a peace builder identity? What is your role within the peace building ecosystem? We can't be all things to all people. So where do you want to show up? And we put something towards a way of being. I'm in the process of finishing for a journal article, an argument about how we can look at developing a way of being in peace building. And then the 4th week, it looks at ways of being with others. So we break it down into 3 different parts here: interpersonal relationships, active listening, and dialogue. And then the 5th and 6th week, designing and implementing projects and monitoring and evaluating projects. I think what I'll do here, let's try something. I'm going to try and share with you the screen so I can show you physically what it looks like and what people are doing over this 6 weeks in terms of engaging with each other. So here we go. So here's what it looks like in practice. This is our online learning platform. Here's the homepage. We invite host facilitators. So I invite Tony Jenkins, many of you will know, Donna, who's a great peace educator from UK, Dr. Yehuda Silverman, who did one of the first PhDs on intrapersonal conflict, Scott Martin, who's the Global Partnership Manager from Mediators Beyond Borders, Greta and Rachel, who are our colleagues at World Beyond War, and also Hemina from Bolivia. So people go to the homepage. And Ellis, Izzy, you guys are experts on this in terms of online learning, so it'll look very familiar, but just to give people a sense, each module is broken down into different parts. We ask the facilitator to do a bit of an introduction video. So there's Tony, hello, welcome to the course. And then we lay out, here's some key objectives for this particular module and some guiding questions, etc. And then what happens, and this is why been crazy over the last couple of months, we create all the content, in terms of people would read through. It's supported a lot by evidence. People would read through the information in their own. This is one thing that the people love, and again, Izzy, Ellis, you do this all the time as well. They can access the material whenever they want to, at their own time, in their own way. So it really works for people, and that's hence why we can have this cross-cultural collaboration taking place. So people would read through all the material. You've got the usual stuff here: negative, positive peace, structural, direct, cultural violence, peacekeeping, peace building, peacemaking, what is power. I'm just giving you one example, so I won't go through all of the weeks. And then at the end, they have 2 ways in which they interact. One is the discussion forums. And what we do based on their learning, we will raise questions, based on their learning to kind of help them go deeper. And then what you see next is really cool interaction of all the participants from South Sudan, Venezuela, Kenya, Nigeria, Serbia, interacting together, sharing, having a space to express themselves in terms of their interests. Here's something. On one of these, I'll just share with you now, one of these, someone from South Sudan shared one of their experiences. And my gosh, it was powerful in terms of, an incident happened and many of their family and people died and things like this, and they shared these experiences. And Venezuela, what's going on now, it's just so powerful to get these lived experiences of people. So yeah, this hopefully gives you a sense. I'm just looking at the time. I know it's coming to the end, so I'll speed up here. But the idea was to give you a sense of, okay, how do we try and address some of these challenges around connecting the head, the heart, the hands, around enabling different cultures to learn from each other, different contexts to learn from each other, around how do we not just stay in the classroom. You know, it's important, you know, and people have different ways of looking at this. My perspective is education in the classroom is necessary, but not sufficient. So we need to support people to do projects or to apply their learning. And at the end of each week, we have resources and things like this. I'm going to go off sharing here now. I know I've got a couple more minutes left. So that's part one. I just wanted to share from you, the idea of this was always, as always, to allow for innovation from the ground up. So this is a little bit about our work. We said, you know, in terms of global recognition, this is a little bit about World Beyond War. For those that are interested, we developed in collaboration with the Global Campaign for Peace Education. There's some of our colleagues there. A free study and action guide. It's on our website, World Beyond War, which is free, which you have lesson plans on a whole host of different issues, from war abolition through to a culture of peace. Here's some of the wonderful people that take our course. In addition to the Peace Education and Action for Impact program, we run courses. We run 4 last year. We'll run 4 again next year. And we always have at least 100 on our courses. The last one that we did, the youngest that I know of was 13. The oldest that I know of was 95. So how about that for intergenerational work? And we have people from all different countries, Afghanistan, Iran, everywhere. In the Peace Education Action for Impact, I wanted to share something because I think it's really nice that the different countries are finding different ways to reflect on their own learning. Okay, and we've always encouraged this. So for example, in Colombia, what they did is that they've, because they have somebody really good in terms of arts as one of their mentors, they reflected on their learning in different ways. One week, they reflected in terms of images and drew something. The other week, they wrote a song or some lyrics about some of the things that they'd learned, you know, on the course. And then another week they reflected on a movie that they've watched that helped them think about some of the material. Another way is there's a wonderful resource called Voicethread. I don't know if you've all heard of it, but it's really, really cool. It's basically an opportunity to have a dialogue in an ongoing way where people can enter and listen to what somebody said and think, okay, I want to build off that. And then physically talk via, you know, and basically listen and reflect on things on an ongoing basis. It's called Voicethread. So US used that. Venezuela, they started their own podcast, and it's called My Piece, obviously in Spanish. I'm thinking My Piece, Your Piece, Our Piece, where each podcast series will reflect on one of the modules. And if people are interested, I can send links, etc. But they've done a really cool job reflecting on it. As we know, and following, you know, John Dewey and things like this, good education is not about just learning and reading or even acting or doing either. It's about reflecting on what we're doing. So we've always highlighted that please, please, please reflect as much as you can. That is the peace education part. We don't have the time to reflect on the peace education part in detail, but just to give you a sense what's happening now in the 12 different countries dotted around the world. The country project teams are designing, implementing and evaluating their projects, which they will finish by the 10th of December and present on the 18th of December. And the projects will revolve around, remember the global security system that we showed you, demilitarizing security, managing conflict without violence, and a culture of peace. They will be framed within that particular framework. As an opportunity to kind of encourage ongoing reflection and this idea of intergenerational cross-cultural communities of practice, we're building in at least every 2 weeks, kind of like we're doing now, opportunities for Venezuela, South Sudan, the 12 countries to come together and share their ongoing work, in addition to being online, sharing the ongoing work. Okay, before we finish, yes, let us do one more Mentimeter, please, to get your feedback, if that's okay. I'm going to come off the sharing screen here. I put one thing appreciated because perhaps none of this is, you know, new, but it's sharing one perspective, you know, in terms of what's working well for us. So please take a couple of moments just to talk about, or just to share a few words in terms of one of the things that you've appreciated from this session. So what we just spoke about for the last half hour. Thank you. I'll go on here. Here we go. Maybe I need to refresh it. Is it working for people? Yeah. Okay. Global scope, head, heart, hands. Thank you. The way it's about different experiences, learning from each other. Thank you. Yeah, international range. Really interesting model. Contribution of doing, knowing, and being. When's the next course? Thank you. Well, I'll answer that one now. And for those that are interested, we'll be planning next year's pilot for next September, and it will be aiming for different country project teams. I can tell you now, I don't know if Andrew's still on the call, but Jane has expressed interest. And in fact, actually, because I know youth workers in Wales, they've said we'll get the money, Phil. So Wales will definitely have a team. And England, we know will have a team as well, but it might be in London, but we can discuss that. And we know that we've got other interest from India having a team, Sri Lanka, Philippines having a team, Argentina. So it will be next September. But let's do a good job of this one first. So we want to make sure that we're actually, in addition, putting together a monitoring and evaluation for this, which I'm working with the University of Cambridge. We've invited a colleague from Cambridge to work with us on the monitoring and evaluation, and also the University of Columbia in the US, which, by the way, Martin, I'll follow up with you on this. They were doing something linked to youth activism that I'm supporting them with. So we can talk about that as well. The University of Columbia, who are, of course, very well known in terms of the peace education field. So Betty Reardon, Tony Jenkins, and others are from the University of Columbia. What else? International, massive project, the international, connecting with people globally. Thank you. I think we'll leave that there, and I want to be respectful of the time. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Hopefully that shared one perspective of one model being used. There's wonderful work being done out there. So I'd love to hear from all the great work that you're all doing. So thank you for listening.